Welcome, everyone. Very excited to have you here. My name is Julia Leaf. I am the current executive director of Cambridge Common Writers, which is a nonprofit organization that supports alums of the Lesley University MFA in Creative Writing residency program. And one of the things that we do that I always love to be able to attend are our book launches for our alums when they have new works coming out. So I am very excited for the conversations that we're going to have tonight with Andrea and Michael. So to just do a brief introduction on both of them, Andrea Ballou is a poetry graduate from the June 2015 cohort of the MFA in Creative Writing program at Lesley University. Her poems and book reviews have appeared in Copper Nickel, Plume, the Missouri Review, and elsewhere, and have been nominated for a Pushcart Prize. She's also the recipient of the National Resource Fellowship, a Tinker Foundation grant, Artist Fellowships, and project grants from the Somerville Arts Council, and residencies at Civitella Ranieri in Italy and Joya in Spain. In addition to her MFA, Andrea received her PhD in Romance Languages and Literatures from the University of Chicago and teaches weekly poetry workshops for seniors at the V&A. And Andrea will be in conversation with Michael Mercurio, a self-described poet by disposition and habit. Editor, educator, and occasional critic, Michael Mercurio received his MFA in poetry from Lesley University in January 2017 and served as the founding executive director of Cambridge Common Writers from 2019 to 2024. Michael's poems, interviews, and reviews have been published or are forthcoming in Palette Poetry, Thrush, The Common, Cream City Review, Sierra, the magazine of the Sierra Club, Sugar House Review, Lily Poetry Review, and elsewhere. His monthly virtual reading series, What the Universe Is, features established and emerging poets reading together on Zoom. When he's not working on his own writing, Michael serves as a member of the steering committee for the Tell It Slant Poetry Festival and teaches as an instructor for the Pioneer Valley Writers Workshop in Northampton, Massachusetts. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Michael and Andrea.
Thank you, Julia. And I have the great fortune of being Andrea's conversation partner for this evening. I know many of you know her. I know many of you have experienced her writing. So I'm just going to give a brief personal gloss on my friendship with Andrea and how much her poetry and her poetic mind have meant to me as a writer. I first met her in a workshop during what was my first semester of grad school at Lesley and what was Andrea's final full semester of grad school. And I was I thought to myself, I really need to up my game when I was reading Andrea's poems. And I was like, this is the bar. I need to try to find a way to meet it. And what I could not have predicted when I was reading those poems before we were actually in the workshop together was how generous and thoughtful Andrea's commentary on my poems would be, and how much of an influence she would be in the development of my own fledgling poetics. And this is true still to this day. She taught a graduating senior seminar on the use of white space in poems that it changed the way I wrote poetry. I went from writing really dense bricks of text to really exploring what the page could do. And that was entirely because of her, because she got me thinking differently. Tonight, you'll get to hear her poems from her debut collection, and you will get to experience her thinking differently. As our mutual friend Kevin Proofer likes to say, a poem is the trace a mind leaves as it's moving across the page. And these traces are enigmatic and gorgeous and deeply, deeply humane. And we're all in for a treat. So I'm going to turn things over to Andrea now so she can read us some of her poems, and then I'll be back later so that we can talk about them.
Thank you, Michael. I like bricks too. That's my muscle to exercise. Okay, thank you, Julia and Michael, and thanks to everybody for being here. And I have to say, I just want to have a shout out to a few people from my poetry group at the VNA. I think they've tuned in to all together with the group viewing. So I'm happy about that. Okay, so I will skip around in the book a little, but I will start with the first poem called Family Business. Everyone in my house has a ripped face. My job is to reupholster them. I use matches, needles, coat hangers, whatever gets the job done. I don't enjoy this work. It is difficult. Everyone has a hat and a foil-lined bed full of rocks. Also, I have a doll. I keep her in a walled garden. She wears a metal bowl on her head. Long ago, she stopped thinking and sits alone under a silvery tree. The ship docks over there in a separate corner. We all go on the ship. We rip our faces. We wash up on the beach. Every day we play this game. It's called house, or sometimes we don't name it. The next one I'm going to read is called Shed, Boat, Shed, and that takes its title from an amazing conceptual art piece by Simon Starling, a British artist who won the Turner Prize. And of course, I've never seen it or experienced it except through the idea, which is kind of the whole thing with conceptual art, where he took a fishing shed, dismantled it, turned it into a boat, sailed it down the river. This was in Germany, and then rebuilt the shed exactly how it was in a museum. And so that's been such a resonant kind of metaphor for me for change, like how you could go through something and appear entirely the same and yet be entirely transformed. Shed, boat, shed. Last week, I heaved myself into the shed, tucked in with roofing nails, hammers, and tins of ham. And guess what? You were there too, surrounded by 4 angels beating their leather wings. They deliberated you, massaged your legs. The wind had freshened the left half of your face, and the angels said to themselves, "He turns out to be short, but not incapable of flourishing." They scraped you open, saw your right hand was withered. That's what they called it. Outside, a squeaky wind pump. Tucked inside a hawthorn bush behind it, a small bird ate without speaking. No air, no one about. You hardly moved. Bits of waiting, the smell of something small and dead. I'd come close to drowning, thrashed the brown water with my own small and ineffective wings. I'd barely pulled my full-length self out of the river. The day was exceptionally quiet, ordinary. Today, though, is another story. Alongside the 4 angels, 400 souls fill the shed up to its roof. I pull out my bread. Inside my timbers, I eat without speaking and watch as you begin to heave. Okay, here's one that's also towards the beginning of the book. Has anybody ever felt rage? Here's a rage poem. It was actually very difficult for me to write. I had to make sure that nobody was in the house. No one was going to sneak up on me. And I wrote them on separate sheets of paper so that I could throw them away and burn them or whatever, and nobody would ever know that I had felt this much rage. It actually follows the first poem, which ends, "Sometimes we don't name it." And so the title of this one is called "It Helps If You Name It." And it's after the story, you probably know, the Greek myth of Diana the huntress and Actaeon, who accidentally spies on her, and she is enraged and throws water on him, and he turns into a stag and runs off, and he's devoured by his own dogs, his own hunting dogs. And here's an epigraph. And so he died, and so Diana's anger was satisfied at last. How she, in that moment, unloads her other cargo, her rage, onto what's his name, is only half the story. Other half pulled apart from the world, bereaved. His dream of saving, seeing her, becomes her own dream. She hunts down the world's refinery, the heart of it. Worst day of my life, alone in the big house near the sea. I have to understand what I want. Destroy is hard to say. Bereavement, rage, town like venom, and then I find myself tracking some sea creature, arched spine against the blue sky. Past the bridge, near it, near his house, could have, too late, seen him. Wants to understand what she wants, what she wanted, build or sail. Deflowered. What flower? Her brain. What is called thinking? Blue rag, bow and arrow. Her vault needs work. It's only half as tall now, paved. No fault but her own. Dragged a table saw through her own window. Oh, the brevity of it. Destruction of the body. Her rage, no, her wrath. The next day, sky and its walkways. All the work of living in the arch itself, inside of it, I call thinking. Work of the mind, that swaggery abdomen, how it maneuvers. I name myself. What's my name? Stump mover, fence lifter, dread of thousands. From the barge you will see my 8 bridges. Is this a true story? I've spilled parts of it. The story is not hard. The trickiest part is thinking back to the road, my car on it. You want to let everyone know how you will save what's his name, that strange piece of yourself you find missing. You are tracked and tracker. Inside the arch itself, even with art, sky is hard to say. Look here, don't trade your brain for anything except a ruin, because destroy is always harder to say. To understand what you want is the trickiest kind of thinking. Rivets a wax wing onto the back of her bird. What's his name has a heart of red feathers. She wants it. She wants it like she wants her car for the way it moves. You want to let everyone know about the work you are doing, the color of it. Takes a sharp right out to sea. Her cargo, nails and lumber of the so-called modern era, needs a complete overhaul, including window replacements. What's his name is someone I want. I want his feathered heart. I want my bridges. I want a job. No one anymore says strange. No one says tank farm or bereavement or refinery. Going through the list again of possible jobs. It must involve thinking, vault, blue rag, maybe exile. 4 pairs of eyes, 4 men nearby, his friends watch the dogs devour what's his name. I want a letter opener, envelopes. I no longer have a car. What I need now is a sickle. What's his name says this is the worst day of his life. Oh, his dogs. No one will deny that. His 4 friends walk out of the forest back to their cars. She hungers for the yellow fields, thinks of him in that big house near the sea, alone now, destroyed. Oh, the venom, the strange tracking, the rage she felt. Over what? Her vault. The road goes right through her archway. She fans herself out. All kinds of creatures breaching her walls. I want a job, the narrowest of bridges. Takes a sharp right. I have to decide, do I want a bridge or a car? Do I want in the world, as in live in it, or just a brief visit? Do I want to live with what's his name in that big house near the sea? In the arch, or on the road now, or all of it? Destroy is half the work I call thinking, where I find myself tracking the strange wooden job of being human. Is there any such thing as a heart brain, color of the road, sky, most powerful of all cargo? Listen, love calls us near to it, or you are so close. I've said enough. How do I love more? Love better and still keep all my equipment. See all 8 of my bridges intact. That was a long one. I have some long ones and short ones in here, so I'm gonna moderate them a little. Okay, here's one called Love Inside the Snow Globe. My friend gathered this was about grief, and she said, how come you didn't just say that? Love Inside the Snow Globe. Every day we drive early to the airport with a white chicken in the back seat. It takes all day to get there. I drop you off and you fly somewhere, icy. On the way home, my brother drives while I hold the chicken in the back seat. We wait at the intersection close to home. Intersect, says my brother, means to cut asunder, cut off one field from another. I hold the chicken tight. I pluck her feathers and paste them all over myself. The chicken and I are white carpet and snow. We are 2 crystals. Okay. This next one I'll read is later in the book. Talk about, bricks versus not bricks. This was a poem that had been very long and I compressed it. Sometimes that's a way for me to really, where like an accordion where you write a lot, then you compress it, then you let it go and you see like what shakes out at the end. So this was the poem that shook out. My son's named Jack, my youngest son. Jack wonders why we call Friday good. In the beginning was the dove. The dove was lonely and set out from home. Watch the lost dove fly out through the open door of heaven, descend through the dark bone of space and hover over the water. See the tendons, the ligaments, all that binds a body to itself. What binds one body to another, we call desire. On that day, 3 sets of fingers reached for each other, over the water and toward the sky. And behold, speech came into being. Speech, son, is how you bind what you love to what you don't yet know to love. How are we doing on time? Let's see here. Okay, I have a prose poem in here. Called Wingman. My brother drives the yellow Ford Fiesta. I am a passenger beside him in the front seat. I want to report to him on my studies, what I've learned abroad in a foreign language. I've read about life before the apple, I say, and we all know what happened after. It's the apple itself I'd like to know more about. We arrive at the waterfront of a small coastal city. He wants to show me his friend's warehouse. I am a grown woman with my own family. My two dogs, Louis and Charlie, are running in and out of the back seat, transported by the brisk air, the fishing boats, the boundless sea, and its salty promise, its durability. I want to tell my brother about the oracle, the wall of words I saw last night in my dream. Out of the big hand came the small hand, and out of the small hand came the big hand. Instead, he opens the back door of my car, which he's filled with dead pelicans, to teach me a lesson about failure. Look here, he says, with a flourish, brandishing one of the stiffened birds upside down by a gray leg. That night, Jesus dive bombs my aircraft carrier. We float next to each other, upright. He wears gray khakis, a blue Hanes t-shirt, shops at Walmart like the rest of us. He is handsome, and I love him. I hover next to him way above the deck. He says he will demonstrate for me his belly down landing technique. It looks preposterous, but just watch. He winks, does a belly smacker onto the landing deck. Everyone thinks he's dead, including me. He rises up next to me, dives again, and lands like a plane. Now, he says, so close his arm touches mine, try flying with your own body. Okay. Here's another bit of a long one in sections, and the title comes from, I happen to love Carl Phillips' poems, and the title of this poem is the last line of one of his poems, and it's called They Said It Would Hurt, and it does. I am in a motel. There's so much to eat here. Dock, nettles, seaweed, famine food. You forgot ashes. Okay. A soul cries out to me. I strain to hear it. Says it wants to live. Leave. I can't tell which. I say no. It says bridge. Gate. Says flood will do. I still say no. It says my heart's become so jagged it cuts flesh. I need a new strategy. In the motel coffee shop, I am rereading The Art of War. I write the word petrified, as in my heart, stone fortress. What pierces best? According to Sun Tzu, whatever turned the heart to stone in the first place. Or maybe I made that up. Oh, would that stone could liquefy, my heart turn watery, become the very sea I sail on. Self-portrait, brackish, back-looking pillar of salt, hearth lover, exile. The eastern hemlock is dying. This winter a neighbor wants to cut our small stand. I say no. I'll watch them die a slow death, anticipate the forest without them. Nightfall. In the art of war, I read about 9 kinds of ground. On enclosed ground, devise strategies. I fan myself out, wide bridge to the sea, not yet sea itself. On death ground, fight. Here, I am at a loss. Hemlock comes to life in late winter, stabilizes the land. 3 years ago, father died. Our own herd still wanders, diminished. What will happen when mother also? I write for the thing that is dying. A crow explodes into the air from the edge of the forest. I am fighting an impulse to not speak. Okay, I am contemplating a vast wall of ovens. My dog is with me. A woman wearing a chef's hat and crisp white coat stares me down, arms crossed next to the ovens. She nods, so I cram the dog into a red cooking pot. He wants to live. What a struggle. I wake up before I finish. Understand, it doesn't matter. I'm not writing about the dog. Okay, this is how you leave me. You wander into the air. I call this a predicament, or in a quieter place, I call it trauma. Do you know what leaving sounds like? Exactly. I record its aftermath. Hemlocks creaking in a silent winter wood, ice crystals forming, or wood petrifying. So now I am thirsty. That means dying in my language. Look at me. I've lost my way. No, you've lost your nerve. I'll go now. Go ahead, walk out. That means die in your language. Not Lot's wife turned back to see her city in flames, then pillar of salt. What did she call herself, if not Lot's wife? I call myself molten. The waitress is asking if I want more coffee. On the other side of the glass, it is raining. You are leaving. How do I say, I will miss you in your language? Or say, we are a people who pass from one field to the next, inarticulate, desirous. Or I am with you and not with you. I am trying to say in any language, I arrive, have arrived just in time to see you pass into the next field without me. Okay. So I have one more. Is that good? Okay. Okay. So you'll see this poem is where the title comes from. The book title comes from. It's Sometimes Winter. It's also the first line of the poem. Sometimes winter, other times midnight. Its belly is not so bitter, is handcrafted. My own belly lights and crackles. Death, if I can persuade myself, is a great thought. So long, she says, lowering her eyes, past the hut, past the tall gray rock, the forest. The reason was not soon. The reason was not the forest. The reason was not the oarsman. It is not so hard to imagine. The reason is I saw myself crackle and weep by the edge of the stream, that bitter day, that tall gray rock. Rejoice, she says, lowering her eyes. Death, lowering now its own belly, has no great thoughts. Other times light, other times rejoice, other times water. So long, she says, so long, forest, so long, bitter day, so long, oarsman. In the mouth of midnight, my story is brittle, delicate. Beautiful? Not so. Other times, maybe. Soon it will be midnight. Soon it will be beautiful. Thank you.
I want to just take a minute here, a second or two at least, to just let the last notes of your reading wash over us. I've been waiting for this book for a while now, because I've been reading your poems for a while now. And one of the things that excites me most about this book is the emotional arc of it, the way your poems trace and describe the world of the speaker. And I have had the opportunity to sit with this book. I was lucky enough to get it from you at AWP and to bring it home with me and sit with it for a while, knowing that this event was coming up. And I'm really just so struck by how beautifully orchestrated the movement in the book is. There are thematic elements that come up again and again: boats, water, various types of birds. And I'm I'm just wondering, what was the process like for you pulling all of these elements together? When did you know you had gotten this into the order you wanted it to appear?
Hmm. Um, it took a long time, I guess. It had so many different orders, and it was all kind of, I'd lay everything out. Um, I have friends in Baltimore who had a huge conference table in their office, and I
Mm,
would go down there. I called it like my residency. And I would just lay it out, and it took a long time to get the rhythm of the different poems, like the length for one, because I know
mm,
that, I have long poems in there, and so you have to have a breather in between some of those long poems. And I guess, I don't know, finally it clicked. It was so many, I can't tell you how many iterations of order that these poems took. And then finally it clicked. But that was after several years
mm.
of working on it. And also taking some poems out, and I had written new poems, even though I think all of the poems in the book, whether they were written a long time ago or more recently, they're all of the same kind of emotional moment.
Yeah, they're very much of a piece. There's not a sameness throughout the book. That would be deadening and flattening, and that does not happen in this book. But they are clearly tracing the arc of a speaker who is wrestling with some fairly serious existential questions. Which is not to say that there isn't some humor in the book as well. Um, as you were pulling it together, did you find yourself revising particular poems to work into that emotional tenor, or were you just writing in a mode where that was just sort of your default while you were working on this?
I think that was my default.
Hmm.
The revisions that I did do along the way had a lot to do with like ratcheting it in, like closer, emotionally speaking, like getting true, like how close could I get to the bone of that emotional truth? And sometimes it took, like, maybe I would have a first version of the poem that was she, and I would change it to I, and then
Hmm.
would ratchet it in further. So that was a lot of the work that I was doing.
Yeah, and it's really fascinating to me that there are so many poems that are deeply personal. We have a close association with the speaker. We are really let into what the speaker is feeling and what the speaker is thinking. But speaking of emotions, your rage poem, which you mentioned was a challenging one to write, um, that poem feels it feels as though the speaker is sort of submerged in that one. It's a really interesting poem, and I'm wondering because that one I've gone back to several times as a reader. It's a challenging one to read. It's a challenging one to piece together because it is, in some ways, very fragmentary.
Mhm.
And what the speaker is relating is clearly familiar to the speaker, but there's this tension between that familiarity and it feeling like it's been rendered unknowable or strange to the reader. Like there's a real sense of dislocation there, which I thought was incredibly powerful. And I'm wondering what your writing process was like for that and your revision process.
So for that one, I really did go upstairs and hide.
Okay.
At that time, I didn't have a studio, so I was working upstairs on my third floor.
Mm,
And so I got it. I just could tell there was something that I needed to write that I had been unable to write, like an emotion that I was something that I was trying to get close to and I couldn't. So I cleared everything off my desk and I had a stack of loose paper. Normally I write in a notebook,
mm,
like one of those composition notebooks. And this time I wrote on loose paper because I had to feel it was all about feeling safe to say whatever it was. Like I didn't know what it was about, and I had to feel safe so that I could burn it if I wanted, so that
yeah.
no one would ever see it.
Yeah.
And I think I might have started with that one. Like sometimes I've been obsessed with that Diana myth for a long time,
Mm,
and I've had several versions of poems about that. Um, I think thinking a lot about love and um, wrath and uh, getting wounded by love with the arrow, like
yeah.
she's huntress and the water and then the destruction and then the wrath, the aftermath of the wrath of feeling remorseful, like she destroyed him in the myth. And well, his dogs did, but but anyway, it's just like that whole mix of emotions. And I think probably I just started a lot of times I start poems by random, just picking from even like The Economist or some other, like the New
Mm,
Yorker, some random phrases. And I write them on a separate paper. And that's all a way to get away from the sort of controlling and rational part of my brain and to get back
yeah.
here so I
Yeah.
can,
To step out of the logic-y part.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know if I sat down to write about something that I was thinking about, like, oh, I'm going to write a poem about rage, well, it would be a Hallmark card.
A very, for those occasions when you're mad at your mother or your, brother-in-law, whatever it is. Yeah,
Or
we may
anything.
need we may need more of those Hallmark cards in the world, but certainly would not give you the poem that you ended up with.
That one is, I mean, I'm guessing it's kind of difficult poem to hear without seeing it because on the printed page, it's sort of like there's I who's speaking, and then there's a she who is commenting on the speaker, me.
Yeah,
And then in parentheses, there are probably there are things that come in parentheses, which I should have or could have indicated, which are more like stage directions. I realized afterwards, like stage directions in a play.
well,
Slide.
we can ask the assembled group in a little while whether they felt that it was difficult to follow. I didn't feel it was difficult to follow, but I'm also really familiar with it at this point,
Yeah,
having dwelled in this book for a bit.
yeah, yeah.
So, yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what folks think. But I really think it's a tour de force because it is such a mapping of tension, and the inner struggle that the speaker has. And I love that you bring it to this point of classical allusion, which, you invoke the name of Carl Phillips. There's somebody who certainly knows his way around classical allusion.
Mhm.
So Yeah, and I love that you picked a Diana myth. There are so many poems out there about, Zeus and all of the people that he deals with or dispatches with, or people who are turned into animals for punishment by other folks. And this Diana myth is not one that, at least in my experience, gets a lot of traffic
Mm.
in the same
Mhm.
way. So I love that. I love that you are really investigating stories that are not told in some fashion. And a lot of your poems do that as well. One of the things that really strikes me about this book is how deeply personal the imagery is. There are not there are some broad images, but a lot of them are really concentrated in this domestic space and in the spaces that you as a poet are familiar with. I love that your speaker's brother shows up a number of times. There are car rides. There's a yellow Ford Fiesta. I mean, these are highly specific images, and I find that they really elevate the poems in such a way. What is your approach to imagery? I mean, you said you start with language, which I get. That's also the way I start. But you do bring in beautiful, startling, arresting images, and I want to hear about where those come from.
Um, well, a couple of things. I think so. I see my friend Hermine Meinhard is here, and I want to say that the way that I generate my material is really I learned that from her, and it really
Mm,
changed the way that I do things. And so for instance, there are times when I will like make a collage. I give myself time to do something like tangible, physical, and it really gets me into uh kind of a play mode, like how kids play. You're just kind
yeah.
of zoned out. And so I just make something or put things together, I assemble things. And then sometimes it has language on it, or sometimes I'll grab some language from elsewhere. And then I just start writing. And I
Mm,
write and write and write until I usually try and write for quite a while so that I get past my, you know, controlling brain so that I can discover, and with language too, what it is, what am I actually thinking about? What am I actually caring about? What is it
mm,
that I'm resisting exposing to myself? What am I afraid to say?
yeah. Yeah.
And the other thing too is I think I grew up for not my whole life, but for a significant time in my life on a farm.
Mm,
And so, and just being in the woods and with horses and cooking and sewing and all that stuff that I learned. Um, I think that's probably where a lot of my images come from too.
yeah, I love that. And I love that it feels to me like a reclamation of what has traditionally been sidelined or minimized as women's work.
Hmm.
There's power in it in your poems. I'm thinking of Famine Road here. And Famine Road, for those of you who have not yet bought the book, is a really beautiful extended piece in the middle of it that is was the first poem I zeroed in on when I was reading the book for the first time. There's just something so striking and transportative about it. But you have a couple of lines in here. All the women in my family sew. First thing I hemmed was an apron. Hazel and my mother still crochet blankets. No one knits socks anymore. My grandmother made lace with knots. That's called tatting. She had useful fingers. Where, you have this legacy in the poem of familial work, and I love the image of useful fingers. I love the fact that this is all action that undergirds things that couldn't happen without it. I mean, because, the folks who are wearing the clothes aren't going to go out without the clothes. So anything that happens outside of the domestic space rests on this work. Yeah, I'm wondering if you would share a little bit with us about whether your family has had any reactions to you writing this book, whether they even notice. Because as I'm always saying, I thrive on the benign neglect of my parents and their utter disinterest in poetry. But I know it's not like that for everyone, and there are so many invocations of familial relationship here.
I think, so my brother was at my launch reading at Blacksmith House, my older brother. I think my younger brother's here on the Zoom. Anyway, so my brother Steve asked me afterwards, he said, "The brother, is that me or Dave?" Like, and no, I think that they can relate to some of the images just because we grew up together and we're close in age. And so some
Mm,
images that might come from like farm life or something like that. Or also the generational images of, Famine Road. We had family that came from Ireland.
mm,
And so that's part of our shared history, of course. And in fact, some of the language for that poem, I generated like it took a long time for that poem to come together, but some of the language in it, I originally generated in one of Hermine's workshops a long time ago.
mm.
And it was so mysterious. I just sat there like, what is this?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there is almost a mystical air to that poem. There's something about it that feels tremendously profound. I mean, a lot of your poems feel almost like spells, like you are in touch with something not directly of this world. But one of the things that has come up in a few of your responses tonight is this sense of things taking time and knowing that we live in a hyper capitalist, on demand, convenience addled society. You have taken your time to write these poems. You've taken your time to revise these poems. You've taken your time to put this collection together. How do you hold space for yourself against the production consumption model that has invaded every corner of our culture, including and perhaps especially poetry?
Um, I think that being obsessed with getting it right is probably the first thing. Even though you want really badly to finish a poem because it's exhausting for it to not be done, and it can kind of be exasperating.
Mm,
And you want so badly for the thing to be done, and then you realize, it's not done. And it's just like obsession, really, I think. And yeah, patience. There was the one poem in there, it's short, called The Brief History of War from Roman times to the present day.
yeah.
That one, I'd written it and I sent it off, and I was waiting to hear back from a journal. And in the end, they had it for a year, and finally they said, "Gosh, we were so close, but there's something, like we're not going to take it." And I left it on my desk, off to the left, because I'm left-handed. So I put it off to the left, knowing that there was something missing, but I had no idea.
Mm,
And finally, one day, I was having a conversation with my son Jack about fletching arrows. And he was explaining to me how to fletch arrows, which was really intriguing to me. Just the sound of the word fletch, plus the
mm,
whole thing of fletching your arrows and putting the feathers on it. Anyway, I was just sitting up there writing something else, and all of a sudden, like an arrow, that line flew into the poem, and it, where it says she fletches her arrows. So it happens like that. And Kate Marvin said recently, we were talking about it, and she said, oh, it's not when you're done with the book or when you're done with the poem. It's about when the poem or the book is done with you.
So it's really interesting that Kate said that, because I don't think of her as it's stereotypically sort of woo woo when the poem is done with you kind of person, but she's right. You know,
Yeah.
it really is when the poem is done with you, when it releases that obsessive, sometimes unhealthy relationship that it has with you.
Well, many of us know Anne Riesenberg from, and I've shared like all these poems in
Yeah.
progress with her. And
Anne is here tonight.
oh,
So
yay,
we
Anne.
can give Anne a shout out. Hi, Anne. You're wonderful, and we're glad you're here.
So I was exasperated. Like every time I thought the book was done, I'd say, okay, it's done. And then a month would go by and I'd be, oh, it's not done. It's not done. And finally, Anne said to me, I think this book is finishing itself in real time. And I was like, oh, she's right. It's right. And when the process of parts of my family life were being, completed, like the divorce, and
Hmm.
then it was done.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and you can't force that stuff.
No, no. And the book, the world acts on the book, and then the book acts on the world. And you need the world to finish with the book before you can bring it into the world, and it can have then the sort of downstream effect that it will have on all of its readers. It is a stunning collection, and I love the complexity of your poems. I really go back to them again and again because there are so many things at stake in these poems. You know, they're not just beautiful language on the page, but there's real emotional depth. There's that all important tension, and things happen. You know, the speaker of your poems is undergoing tremendous life changes, and reckoning with that, reckoning with legacies of a history that stretches far back beyond the immediate family. And you know, there are some really intense moments, but they are handled so beautifully on the page, and as we heard tonight, read so beautifully by you. And like I said earlier, there are some moments of levity. There is a certain wooden duck that makes a few appearances in a couple of the
Yeah.
poems,
He's
which,
very cranky.
yeah, he is. I mean, I kind of relate to him. I felt like, you know, he's a Guardo Camino for me, a road companion. But I remember that wooden duck from one of the first poems of yours that I read 10 years ago,
Mhm.
a little more than 10 years ago at this point. And I was glad to see that the duck carried through. But I also love the fact that the duck is very much a personal image for you. You know, it's not necessarily an archetypical image. It's not the moon. It's not, you know, do poets have other archetypical images besides the moon? I don't know. Um, that's the only one I can think of right now. I'm sure we have more, but
The
Ducks.
rose.
yeah. What did
Yeah.
you say, Stephen?
I said ducks. That's the other archetypal image
Yeah.
in
Well,
poetry. Is
I mean, I know
the
there are a
duck.
lot of
Chicken occasionally, but
chicken occasionally, a wheelbarrow here and there, a goose or two, sometimes wild. But you know, this wooden duck, which I've always envisioned it as a decoy, which for me lends
It
a
is.
really which lends a really interesting double meaning, because you have this literal wooden duck that is in these poems, but it's also a decoy. What is it a
Mm.
decoy for the speaker? How is it functioning as a decoy in the poem? Which I don't expect you to answer that. That's something that we can all go write essays about. Um, but you know, I would love to hear a little bit more about how this duck became such an intense personal image for you.
I think the duck became like a cranky muse. You know what? The duck was getting it. It's like, it was a way for me to go further and deep
Mm,
and say things that I might not want to say, or so that poem, so the first one I wrote with the duck is called What the Wooden Duck Says at Night, or says
yeah,
when I can't sleep at night. And really the way that poem, starts out like, what kind of a word are you looking for? Um, that's in italics, and it's I say an Ice Age word or pre-Columbian, something with feathers on it. How about flannel or sandpaper? Well, so the way that happened was I was trying to write some poems for one of my packets at Lesley, and
mm,
it was with my mom up at her house. And it was kind of late in the evening, and I got my laptop out, and I'm sitting in one chair, and she was sitting in her rocking chair, and the wooden decoy was up on, like a buffet.
yeah,
And so I incorporated the duck so I said, Mom, give me a word. And I was just going to start writing. And I said, Mom, give me a word. And she said, what kind of a word are you looking for? And so I just started writing. And then,
yeah,
so that voice became the duck, who became very cranky and pushy and would call me on stuff, which, you know, you need when you're writing so that you don't fail to go far enough.
yeah, yeah. So that you also don't become sort of self-indulgent and rest on your laurels when you've got a duck nipping at your proverbial heels. I have to say, I love the poem Passover with the Wooden Duck, because the duck in that poem takes on almost a sort of biblical significance and starts to speak with a voice that's not just cranky, but it's sort of like cranky Old Testament God.
Mhm.
And it's such a smart poem, and it's so beautiful to have this figure of the duck carrying through.
Yeah, I guess he showed up when he was needed.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, superheroes kind of do that, I guess.
I
So
never thought of my duck as a superhero, but I
I
like
didn't until just now, but it really does sort of fit.
that.
Yeah. So, what is there that I haven't asked you that you want folks to know about this book, or about your process, or about what you're excited about in the world of poetry right now?
Hmm, I don't know.
Okay. All right. And that's a fair response. I mean, if you don't know, we can always open it up to folks if they have questions,
Sure.
or if they have, gushing adulation and praise that they can't hold back any longer, which is also perfectly acceptable.
Or
Uh,
bewilderment, that's okay too.
or bewilderment. I mean, poetry is a form of enacting bewilderment at times.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. And so, Julia, I think if you want to unspotlight us so that everybody can see each other, then folks will be able uh, to feel bold and either unmute themselves and jump in, or if you want, you can type your questions in the chat, and I will be happy to read them.
I have a bunch of questions, if that's okay.
I figured you
And
would, Stephen.
right, I mean, so you can jot them down. No, actually, one is for you, Michael. If
Oh,
because you mentioned the trajectory in
yeah.
the book, and I mean, I've read the book as poems many, many times, but I'm reading it as a book somewhat more with somewhat more attention as a book than I have in the past. And since I want to steal from you, I'm just curious, what do you see it as, an emotional trajectory? What
I
are a few of the points on the trajectory that you think are salient?
Well, I'm glad you asked.
It's not a quiz.
It, Stephen, of course it's a quiz, and
No, it's
I
not.
have studied for this. I'm glad you asked though, because I do see it as an emotional trajectory or an emotional arc, and I see it as really, the book is divided into four sections, and the speaker, who is, to me as I read it, the same speaker throughout. There aren't persona poems in
A lot
here.
of other voices as well.
A lot of other voices, but there is a
Yeah.
consistent
Oh, yeah.
speaker,
Yeah.
which, again, to invoke Carl Phillips, Carl and I had a conversation not that long ago where I posted a meme on Instagram about, the speaker of the poem and the poet not being the same. And he messaged me and he said, the I in my poems is always me.
I'm
And
with Carl on.
I know you are. And Andrea, I don't want to presume that the I in your poems is always you. I think sometimes it is, and sometimes it's a heightened version of you. But, the fact that this book starts with family business really says something to me, because it then goes through all of these different permutations of family, and there is a divorce at the center
Yeah.
of it. And there is the wrestling with the emotional fallout from that divorce, and it's not a linear arc. There is some sort of up and back and up and around. It is clearly moving forward, but it's moving forward almost in waves. And
Yeah.
I found that to be really powerful. And that's, I thought the way that the poems flowed into each other was really smart, because there would be
I think
things.
Family Business is one of the most scorchingly understated poems.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if the book ended there, it would feel like the end of Macbeth, or before the end of Macbeth. But beginning there, you want to get away from that sensibility. I mean, it's a powerful sensibility,
Yeah.
but
Oh, yeah. And then to have that sort of juxtaposed with Famine Road later on in the book, it's the same family, but it's different aspects of the family. And it's, the legacy in Famine Road leads us to family business. Um, but we don't know that when we're reading Family Business. And so
interesting.
it really is just this gorgeous, powerful arc. I'm mesmerized by it. I'm rethinking the order of one of my manuscripts because of this. I'm continually learning from you, Andrea, is what I'm saying here. So thank you for that.
So do you want to say, Andrea, that is not what I meant at all?
No, I actually, to say that something proceeds in waves, I
Mm,
think is emotionally true. Something, whatever kind of event you go through, or trauma, or of any kind, but you don't process that emotion in a linear way. It's almost like spiraling down,
yeah, you
or it
can't
comes in waves. Yeah.
you can't face it all at once all the time. And I think a lot about grief, and I think a lot about how grief is both a process and an emotion. And I always say it's like the way physicists say light is both a particle and a wave. Grief
Mm-hmm.
is a process and emotion. Grief is one of the emotions in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these poems are working through the process of it, but it's not a linear process.
Mm-hmm.
It can't be. We move forward in time, but we are able to remember what came before. And I think that's an important aspect of this book. And I think when you're wrestling with the past, and when you're doing things like uh, A Brief History of War, I don't want to get the title wrong, but I'm trying to find here, A Brief History of War from Rome to the Present Day. Like, that announces that you are dealing with bigger things than just one person's life and one person's existence. And to have that perspective added helps to shift the emotional weight of the book in a way that's really productive for what the speaker is going through.
Yeah, it is definitely generational.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love to just comment that reading this book, Andrea, I felt that I was being brought on this mythic, into this mythic place. And I was being led by someone who had this incredible mythic wisdom. I didn't always know how I got there, but I was always amazed that I was there, that there's a whole other level of reality and understanding that this book embodies. And some moments it was a little confusing, but I was thrilled to be in those moments anyhow. And I feel very grateful for this book. And I know that I will live with it and keep coming back to it. So I just, I wanted to say that.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have another question.
Of course.
Can I? No, but these were the two things, the main things that occurred to me was your notion of trajectory, but this one's for Andrea. You, more than most writers I know, talk a lot about the physical act of writing, the paper, the sort of, when you say collage, you don't just mean something mental. You mean, and your erasures, it seems very much that you're where you are when you're writing. And I was thinking about that, and I remembered something that my mentor Marvin Bell said. He was so happy when computers developed and when he could word process his poems. He said, I'll just write something, and if it's no good, I'll just delete it and write something else. And it was like, for him, the exact opposite. The location of the writing was entirely his head. Didn't matter. He was happy that the physical tools of it were simply more convenient. Whereas for you, I think the exact opposite, that would be a terrible attitude to take towards the process of writing, in that, well, I'll stop there because I don't want to conclude what for you is the experience. That how does that relate to your writing? What the physicality of the materials of writing?
I think for me, it's because I feel like there's a lot of knowledge and memory and that is housed in the body that you can't, that is hard to access, but you can't think your way there. You somehow physically have to experience your way there to get at those memories or get at those connections that I'll say that I wouldn't be able to make otherwise. And sometimes, yeah, I think that's why, sometimes we have weird illnesses sometimes, or the mind-body connection and the mind-body spirit connection for me is crucial. It's really strong. And I feel like this way of working, just like being physical, like even moving in a certain way, or sometimes allows me to access places in myself.
So maybe it's not convenience, but inconvenience that can be the provoking.
Yeah.
Whenever a student says to me, I've got to come up with an image I know there's an image, but I don't know what it is. I say, go somewhere without any writing input, take a shower, but don't bring a waterproof pen with you. And at least my experience is often I leave the shower chanting something that popped into my head that, you know, and I'm glad no one is observing, but you have to sort of trick your mind not to be paying too much attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I often find that I will get bits of language that pop into my head while I'm driving. And that's almost as inconvenient as anything else. Because I do not know how to do the sort of text to speech thing on my phone. I can't figure that out. So anyone else have any questions for Andrea or any comments or any adulation that they'd like to share? Anne Riesenberg.
Yes. Hi, Andrea. This is fun.
Hey, Ann.
I've just been thinking a lot about voice. And I do know these poems really well, and I've heard you read them now twice in the last couple of weeks, and it's just, they're like strike my ears differently each time. But what what I'm coming away with tonight is that, you know, there's some integrity, I guess, in, you know, having sort of partnered with you, waiting for that word, or, you know, waiting or knowing that something wasn't right, and just how faithful you were to, like, you just didn't do whatever was convenient because you were impatient or because you wanted to get it done. You really waited to hear the right word. So now when I listen to these poems, it's like it's like you come from another planet, which is kind of makes me feel
Been
good.
told
But
that.
I think I come from another planet too. And it's sort of like this honoring of, I think, many of us that have like a, you know, we want to speak our own languages. We don't really want to speak other people's languages. And I think you've been really successful in, you know, making space for your own language to come through, because nothing in this feels borrowed at all. You know, it all feels really like it generated from you as a, you know, as a spectacular individual. And I just think that's, you know, I don't think there's anything better than that, really, is to feel that somebody didn't, you know, didn't cave to, you know, convention, to pressures from, you know, what if somebody else might think. It's just, it's very, I mean, besides all the wonderful imagery, it's also just sort of like a real support to keeping going with finding one's own voice in whatever medium you're working in, you know, whatever you're doing. I don't, not even necessarily writing poetry, but just that we don't give in to saying, oh yeah, that's fine, when it isn't fine, or we're not done, or, you know, it's not accurate enough to what is really true for us. So I think that's a really lovely sort of message that comes through, that, you know, so now when I hear the parts that I still might not quite understand, you know, I can sort of have some distance and just feel like, oh, but that's okay. You know, this is what Andrea's world is like, you know, so there's this sort of respect and this knowing. Anyway, so thank you. It's
Yeah.
really
I like
lovely.
the word accurate. Yeah.
Hey,
Thank you.
Andrea, congratulations.
Oh,
It's
thank you.
so wonderful to see you, and just it's just terrific to know this book is out in the world. And you know, you actually, Anne, you touched upon, I mean, something about when you want to just keep going back to read these poems, and when you don't maybe understand everything. But I think that's the best kind of writing. I think the best kind is when you don't understand it right away and you want to go back and you want to really delve deep. But you know, you talk about a lot of these, like the patience and thinking it was done and it's not done. And do you remember the moment when you were just like, it's done? Like, how did that feel? What was that feeling? Or do you remember that?
I think that a few months before I heard from Persia about the book, I think by that time, like, it felt like it clicked into place in terms of the order was puzzling to me sometimes. But then futzing around with the order of the poems, was really good because it helped me understand individual ones better.
Mhm.
Because sometimes I wasn't quite sure, except like, okay, what are they doing? What's this one doing? And I understand it in relationship to the others, and that made it, yeah, I guess it kind of clicked. And also there was a moment too where actually Kevin Proofer had looked at a version I had, which was sort of the penultimate version. And I said, okay, what do you think? And he said, this looks good. I'd take out this one, this one, this one, this one. And taking out certain poems was really revealing to me about what those poems weren't necessary. Like, what were they kind of clogging up? And so by taking those out, it became a lot more evident, more skeletal, which was really good. Yeah.
I know, I just remember some of your earlier, your erasure poems and your collaging, and you would cut up and you would be putting them on your, brown paper and having that. It's just wonderful to see how this now, they're all together.
Yeah, I still do it that way.
Yeah, yeah, as Stephen says, very physical, and I agree. There's something about that ability to cut up and then just see what sort of rise to the surface, what
Also,
remains.
I think sometimes you have to be willing to destroy something,
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
if there's anything there at all, it will come back to you. Anything true, anything
100%.
worth it. And if it's not, then you got to let it go away.
Yeah,
May mean like you have to sort of destroy the whole thing
yeah,
first. Yeah.
terrific. Good.
Wow. Last call for heaping praise upon Andrea and her beautiful book, which I have dropped the link in the chat again so that if you do not own it yet, you can and should.
Will you forgive one more? I just want to say one more thing, if I may.
Yes, Stephen, of course. And then Cindy, you're up after Stephen.
Oh, I'm sorry, Cindy. Go ahead.
No, we're all
Cindy?
waiting to hear what you have to say, Stephen.
I just wanted to say that I listened, I've heard Andrea read a number of times now, sometimes with the book, sometimes not with the book, reading along, and not in absolutely exact ways, but you can hear the white space when she reads the poems. This is why I'm so interested in the concept of space-time, because I don't think white space by itself is interesting in verbal art. It has to be space-time for it to reward reading rather than just looking. But you can hear the white space. You don't know exactly where it is. It's not a one-to-one thing, but these are rhythmically spacious as well as spacious in a more spatial sense.
Well, it almost becomes like musical notation, and having a rest in music. But yeah, we could talk about that all night, and one of these nights we'll have to. But I want to make sure that Cindy gets to jump in here.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that I can hear the white space.
I'm sorry.
No, it's so fun
Great minds.
It's really fun. And thank you, Andrea. It's a pleasure to hear how this has culminated. And there's one of the last ones you read, In the Mouth of Midnight, My Story is Delicate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the throat of the book, it's strong. It's good to see all of you good people too.
Yeah, it is.
It's especially moving to me to see you all, if I may say that particularly during this time in the program's history, but this program, you guys have made each other such good poets. It's really matters a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
we had a good
Thank you,
foundation,
Stephen.
Stephen. So thank you for that. And truly, it is deeply, deeply moving, as Stephen said, to see so many Lesley folks gathered. Still, I mean, I've been out of the program for a while. You all, with the exception of Julia, left before I did. So to know that you're all still showing up as part of this community is really profound. And it is
It's
a
a
big
real
part.
contribution that
Yeah.
that everyone involved is, and I'm sorry I'm sounding a little past tense, and I don't mean to overstate that case, but we've all made our contribution.
Yeah, well, that's why we started Cambridge Common as an independent
Yeah,
entity,
yeah.
because we wanted to make sure that for as long as there are Lesley MFA alums, there will be an organization to provide support and to provide a home. So, if you are not active in CCW, please feel free to get active. You too can host book launches. I don't have to host all of them. I do enjoy it, but I'm more than happy to yield to others if they want to have conversations with brilliant poets like Andrea Ballou or Cindy Hunter Morgan or Christine Jones or Eileen Cleary, or even that Stephen Kramer fellow, if we ever do a book launch for him.
He's used up.
But it really is so meaningful to be part of this community and for everyone to show up to celebrate what we're doing. So I want to say on behalf of myself and my time at CCW, thank you all. Julia, do you want to say any closing words?
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Andrea, for a wonderful discussion. And thank you to everyone who attended for showing your interest and your support. It is so meaningful when we host these events that we have people who are able to attend and engage with the author and with their work in such a meaningful way as you all have done tonight. So thank you all so very much for that.